So welcome everyone to our workshop today. We will talk about and discuss about how the concept of circular economy and the Basel Convention are compatible. We all know basically that the Basel Convention was adopted decades ago with the main aim of regulating the trade of hazardous waste and especially to avoid the dumping of waste in poorer countries. I think we can all agree that this is really the aim that we should follow, and that this is really the core of trading waste. But practical examples also show that the implementation of the Basel Convention sometimes make trade to certified companies a bit difficult, and the processes can be very lengthy. So this will really be the core of our workshop today. So the workshop was organized together with the SHRI program, the STEP initiative, and the Prevent Waste Alliance. And within the next hour, we will really discuss how the two approaches of the Basel Convention and the circular economy can work together. So we created the workshop in a way that we will first receive input presentations from Daniel Hinchliff and from Isabel Baudeux. They will present on different issues. On one hand, we will get some practical experiences on how, what difficulties maybe are associated with the Basel Convention, and on the other hand, we will get also input on a new proposal from Switzerland and Ghana. But first, before we dive into the discussion and before we really can start the content of our session today, I would also like to thank Matthias Schlöb, who was really instrumental in putting this very interesting concept and the concept of this workshop, and who was also very instrumental in putting the speakers together. Thank you, Matthias, very much for being so proactive with this. And and also maybe some technical things before we really start the discussion and before we go into the details and the content of today's workshop. So we will read the session will be recorded and then be online for everyone. And you will be able, or the audience and the participants are able to put questions or statements in the chat function used by the conference tool that I think you're all already familiar with after the first sessions during the WRF. Matthias is so kind so that he will take a look and he will moderate the chat and will summarize then the most important points at the end of the session. So we have reserved a couple of minutes really at the end also of the panel discussion in order to address the points that are raised by the audience. I think that was really the main technical things that I should also mention to you. I don't know, Matthias, just a quick check if there's anything I forgot.
Oh, that's perfect. Thanks.
Okay. Good. So we can really start now. And I would like to start with introducing Daniel Hinchliff, who is an advisor at the GIZ, and he is leading the EWaste working group within the Prevent Waste Alliance. And he is also an active member of the STEP initiative. And in this role, he recently has initiated a joint Prevent STEP working group to discuss the implementation of the Basel Convention. But I think he will tell you all about it himself. Daniel, please, the floor is yours.
So thanks very much, Elizabeth, for that introduction. I hope you can see my screen. Yes, great.
Yes.
And I will also turn off my video because I've had problems in the past. So yeah, as Elizabeth mentioned, I have this role. I'm partly working for GIZ, so the German Development Corporation. And within that role, I'm also coordinating the activities of the EWaste working group within Prevent Waste Alliance. And we have been collecting experiences in the last year around what it's like to actually implement the Basel Convention, but mainly from the recycler side. So I'd like to share some of those insights today in a very brief overview. So as Elizabeth mentioned, originally the Basel Convention was set up to avoid hazardous waste exports, particularly from OECD countries to non-OECD countries, where we were seeing hazardous waste dumping. On the right-hand side, you can see the standard narrative, let's say, for e-waste exports. You see Europe, America, different countries would be shipping e-waste to other nations, in such a case, dumping it there. And the Basel Convention was set up to try and control this, to avoid that this is happening, because in many countries there's no e-waste management facility in place. So you see on the left-hand side here in Ghana, if e-waste lands in this context, it might be handled by the informal recycling sector, and this has a lot of environmental impacts. So we are completely for this aim that we want to stop dumping of hazardous waste in this context. The Basel Convention was set up in 1992, or it came into force in 1992, to try to control and reduce these transboundary movements of hazardous waste. And following this, a ban amendment came in, which then also prohibits the export of e-waste or hazardous waste from OECD countries to non-OECD countries. And at the same time, it aims to support environmentally sound management of these wastes across the whole world. And the basis for controlling this waste shipments is actually the prior informed consent procedure. So if I'm sitting in Europe or another country and I want to ship it to another country that's party to the Basel Convention, I have to get prior informed consent from them. They have to approve that I can transport it. But also all of the states in between, the transit states where my shipment might stop, they also need an approval according to this prior informed consent procedure process. And under the Basel Convention, e-waste is defined generally as hazardous waste, but there are exemptions for contaminated waste fractions or printed circuit boards, for instance. And just to give you an idea, so what we're looking at today is actually the opposite way around. What happens if you're in a lower middle income country, you're a recycler, and you want to send something to Europe or somewhere else? So we see in many lower middle income countries, you have small and medium enterprise formal recyclers. They try to do things sustainably. And they're normally dismantling e-waste, and then they get different fractions, be it steel, copper, which you can give to local industry. Printed circuit boards, which you might need to export to other smelters, for instance, in Europe. And then you also have hazardous waste fractions coming out, like batteries, fluorescent lamps. You probably don't have a local processing facility to actually deal with these, so you also have to export these. And for this, you then need to engage with this Basel hazardous waste prior informed consent procedure. And so looking at it from the other way around, if you are sitting in one of these countries or anywhere you want to do a hazardous waste transport, you have to then get in touch with your Basel focal point and the Basel focal points in different other countries and ask for an approval for you to do the waste shipment. There are many other steps in between. So just a simplified process here. You have to basically get approvals from wherever you're sending. And this could be from Africa to Europe. It could be from Latin America to Europe or Asia or America, or in Asia to other neighboring countries, for instance. So this is really crucial to the whole transboundary movement of hazardous wastes, which we're talking about today. And we've heard for many years, this is actually very difficult to export in this nature. And with Prevent and STEP, we have a large number of members. We have about 100 members working worldwide on the e-waste issue. And we thought, well, this seems to be an issue for many of our members, so let's try to collect some experiences. What is it like if you're sitting in one country, you want to export somewhere else? Does it work well? Are there case studies we can draw on good practice, for instance? And maybe there are challenges, maybe we can find solutions for this. So we looked at some case studies as well, lithium-ion batteries from Nigeria to EU, for instance. We looked at customs issues in South Africa, also regional dynamics in Latin America, what happens in islands, and some good examples as well. And we hope to publish these experiences by the end of the year. So looking at the different countries across the world, we see there are different categories which you can try to class or classify the countries in. So you have some countries where you might go to the authority and they don't really know how to deal with the Basel Convention. They've never done an actual shipment to this process before. And then maybe you have to explain how this process works to them. So if you're an SME recycler, of course, this is a challenge. You don't have the capacity to train your authorities as well. And the reason that this was coming up actually in this working group is that we have a number of international operators. They go to a country to help ship some wastes. And they want to do it to international procedures. But as soon as they then get to the authorities, they realize that no shipments have actually ever been made according to the Basel process before. So they have to engage with this. And in the worst case, they might be recommended just to bribe someone at the border to ship it illegally. Then we have other countries where there are procedures which are being implemented quite well in the authorities. They know how to deal with the Basel Convention, but not all authorities across the whole country are aware of the Basel Convention processes. So it might be that the customs are holding up your shipment because they don't know what the Basel Convention is. They keep it for a few days at the border, then you have standing costs. And at the same time, they let through all of the illegal e-waste traffic because they don't see any problem with that. There's no Basel Convention thing which they are trying to permit. So it's difficult for some exporters to get a stamp on their imports if it's following Basel. And on the other hand, it's easy to do illicit trade because it's not being checked. And then the third category, we have countries where it's being well implemented across the board. But actually, there's a bit of mistrust between different authorities, and some of the authorities might overreach. They might ask for too much information. You might have to supply huge dossiers of information. This all leads to delays and additional costs. And different countries have different ratifications, different definitions. So you see there also difficulties with the process in general, and here the EU is an example. So just to quickly go through some of the challenges, we see this lack of enforcement and awareness in different countries on how to help implement these shipments. There's different definitions, for examples. Customs have difficulties. It's time consuming. In our survey of different members, we saw permits could take from a few weeks up to months, or in some cases even years, to get the approval according to this process. And some transit countries don't even react, actually. So you can't ship on that route if they don't react. Then you have high costs. So every single country where you need to have an approval, sometimes you also have administrative costs, and these can be 500 euros upwards. And the single highest cost for a notification was 20,000 euros from our discussions. And you also have to back that up with a bank guarantee, which can be up to 150,000 euros, which also locks kind of money down until the whole shipment process is through. And we start to see increasingly sea carriers are starting to refuse hazardous waste. This is due, on the one hand, to transit countries. If they see the waste shipment comes through, that the container might not even be offloaded, but then it's getting blocked and the ship stays in the harbor. And they don't want that to happen to their ship, of course. They also have risks and insurance issues, and actually most, if not all, sea carriers are currently refusing to take lithium-ion batteries due to this reason. So the impact is it's actually making it advantageous to do things illegally, to not follow the Basel Convention, because it's quite difficult in many of these contexts to get an approval. So if you are a small and medium recycler in one of these contexts, you don't have subsidies from extended producer responsibility. If you want to stay viable, then often your choices are between, I just avoid the hazardous waste because I know I can't deal with that afterwards, or I store this hazardous waste until it becomes viable, maybe for an export, or I give it to an informal sector person who takes it over the border for me, and I don't know what happens to it afterwards. The alternative is that I myself then decide, okay, well, I just declare it falsely as used goods or undeclared, because I know probably it's not going to be controlled afterwards. So this is the issues that we see, and we really want to support the implementation, because at the moment we feel like this environmentally sound management is being hindered by the lack of implementation. And if we want to get to a global circular economy, we need to support local ecosystems for e-waste to be established. And if we are able to free up time with a good formal process, then we think as well that authorities would have more time to focus on the illicit trade that's going on. In the working group, we're also discussing solutions. We want to keep solutions within the scope of the Basel Convention because it's a good thing. So we're looking at ideas around practical capacity building. Electronic digitalization processes could also be an option. Also fast track approval processes, what's been done. Could you maybe link it up to pre-consent facilities or improve the transit provisions? So if a container doesn't leave the ship, is there maybe a non-transit status? This is, of course, more complicated than gathering experiences, but these are some of the things we're looking at and hoping to also provide ideas to take things forward in this working group. So with that, I'm done, and I pass back over to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Yes. Thank you very much. I think you already mentioned very interesting insights, and I'm sure that some of the speakers in the panel discussions will also be happy to react to some of the points you just raised. But in order to also keep the timing, I will now hand over to Isabel Baudin. Isabel is a scientific officer at the Swiss Federal Office for the Environment. She has been instrumental in putting together the Swiss-Ghana proposal to amend the Basel Convention and gain better control over the movement of all e-waste fractions, hazardous as well as non-hazardous. So she will really give us some insights how this proposal came together and what it entails. Isabel, please, you can start sharing your screen. I hope it works.
Yes. Okay. Do you see the presentation?
Yes, we see the presentation, but it's, yeah, now it's good.
Okay, thank you. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Isabel Baudin, and I'm working at the Federal Office for the Environment in Switzerland. I am working in the Waste and Resource Division. And I'm very pleased to present you today the amendment proposal of the Basel Convention of Ghana and Switzerland. And we are very happy to have on board Ghana as a partner for this proposal. I will give you an overview of the proposal, the challenges, and the next steps. So Daniel Hinckliffe already presented a bit about the Basel Convention, but still, so the Basel Convention is an international agreement that is controlling transboundary movement of hazardous waste and their disposal. 188 parties have ratified the agreement, and it preserves natural resources. Nowadays, the Basel Convention is also working with multi-stakeholder partnerships like the one on computing equipment, PACE, the one on household waste and plastic waste. And before we had the mobile phone MPPI. And finally, we have the ban amendment, which is very important. It prohibits export of hazardous waste from OECD countries and the European Union to non-OECD countries. So Ghana and Switzerland have forwarded an official amendment proposal in January 2021 concerning the classification of e-waste for discussion and possible adoption at COP15. I would like to give you a short overview of the proposal. So today, only e-waste characterized as hazardous under the Basel Convention are subject to the prior informed consent procedure that is also named as PIC procedure. In case of export from OECD countries to non-OECD countries, the ban amendment applies. Today, transboundary movement of e-waste that are not characterized as hazardous take place without any notification, and thus there is no insurance that this waste will be treated in an environmentally sound manner. With the amendment proposal of Ghana and Switzerland, the situation for e-waste characterized as hazardous under the Basel Convention will remain exactly the same as today. But what is new is that the planned transboundary movement of e-waste not characterized as hazardous will also be subject to the PIC procedure. This means that the export, transit, and most important, import countries must give their consent to such movements. This will result in transparency and should ensure environmentally sound recovery with state-of-the-art treatment for all e-waste that are subject to transboundary movement. With the amendment proposal, Ghana and Switzerland are heading for the goal of directing all e-waste, its component and constituent that are subject to transboundary movement, to environmentally sound management, to recycling with state-of-the-art technology, and to a maximum of resource recovery and an environmentally sound final disposal of non-recoverable material. So aiming for this goal means that applying the PIC procedure to all e-waste is a prerequisite for the assurance of environmentally sound management of all such categories of waste. So what is the reasoning behind that? So as you probably know, we expect huge volumes of e-waste in the coming years. The estimation for 2030 are by 74 million tons of e-waste, which is equivalent to nearly 7,400 Eiffel Towers per year. If we look at it from the African perspective of view, it is about 13 Giza pyramids per year. So the goal is that all this e-waste will be treated environmentally sound in an environmentally sound manner. The goal is also to minimize uncontrolled transboundary movement. At the moment, 7 to 20% of the e-waste are subject to transboundary movement. One other goal is to improve the management of e-waste. E-waste not treated with state-of-the-art technology harms human health and the environment, regardless if it is characterized as hazardous or non-hazardous. Currently, only 17% of the e-waste generated worldwide is treated in an environmentally sound manner. So the objective is to achieve state-of-the-art recycling for all this e-waste. And finally, e-waste contains material with high value. So the next goal is to avoid huge losses of valuable resources. So the transboundary movement will be documented. So if we have a look at the benefits of the proposal strengthens the transparency. So monitoring of all e-waste that are moved transboundary is easier. It protects vulnerable countries from unwanted imports. It also ensures state-of-the-art recovery for all e-waste, and further, the proposal increases the sustainability of the whole recycling chain with a more valuable recovery. Lastly, the proposal results in a better protection for the environment and human health, and it contributes to circular economy. So the proposal is a clear contribution to a healthy and safe circular economy, as much more material remains in the production cycle, as it avoids the loss of huge amounts of valuable resources, and it ensures environmentally sound management. We know that there are still open challenges on the e-waste discussion under the Basel Convention. As for example, we have the waste and non-waste discussion. The peak procedure should be improved and smoothened, and we have further work on the e-waste technical guideline of the Basel Convention with the goal of a final adoption. But in our view, the proposal is an important step forward in the whole e-waste discussion. And last but not least, the amendment proposal of Ghana and Switzerland does not tackle the waste and non-waste discussion and does not change the waste definition. The waste definition is laid down in Article 2 of the Convention. The proposal also does not classify additional e-waste as hazardous. The definition of hazardous waste is laid down in Article 1 of the Convention. So what are the next steps? We will continue to disseminate and explain the amendment proposal. We are collecting comments. We are broadening the support, and we will have a discussion of the amendment proposal at the next open-ended working group 12, which is planned before the COP15. And then further discussion and possible adoption of the amendment proposal will take place at COP15, which is scheduled for June 22. So thank you for your attention. I hope that our argument convinced you, and we hope to welcome you by supporting the Ghana and Swiss proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isabel, for this great input presentation and for giving us a bit more background also to the proposal. I'm sure that also the panel discussion will touch upon some of the points you raised, and I also hope or think that maybe the points will be interesting for you to also taking it up then in the further discussion. You see already that now the other persons in the workshop are turning on their cameras. That's great, because we will now move on to the second part of the workshop, which is a panel discussion. And I'm very pleased to introduce our speakers of the panel, because I really think it's a great panel with core experts in the field of international trade and of waste under the Basel Convention. And I'm sure almost all of you know at least one or two speakers from previous conference sessions, discussion publications, or even TV programs. I think they're very well-known names on our panel. So just a quick introduction to each of them. So we have Chris Likers on the panel. He is really one of the experts, and I guess one of the most experienced person also in the whole discussion around transboundary movement. He has been the CEO of MGG Polymers, and with this also has really first-hand experiences in organizing shipments from one country to the other. Then we have Jim Bucket. He is the executive director of the Basel Action Network. And actually, when I yesterday evening checked, okay, what would be a quick introduction to him, I saw a statement that he is the only person who attended every Basel Convention meeting. So I think this is really also gives first of all, I think it's impressive, and it really also gives an idea that he is also one of the core experts in this discussion. So really great to have you on the panel. Then we have Sam Adokumi. He is the director of Chemicals Control and Management Center at the Ghana EPA, and he has been together with Isabel, also very active in putting the proposal, the Swiss-Ghana proposal together, and of course has a different view on the whole discussion, as he is based in Ghana and he's Ghanaian, so it's also good to have someone from Ghana represented in the discussion. And last but not least, I'm happy to introduce also Kimberly Botwright. She is a global leadership fellow at the World Economic Forum, where she works on trade and investment policies and impact project. And inter alia also on a project to pilot electronic notification processes for documents that are required in order to trade e-waste under the Basel Convention. So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining this panel discussion. In my introductory notes at the beginning, I already mentioned that the Basel Convention as well as the concept of the circular economy are both very important, and I think there is no discussion that one is better than the other. But I think also really the core question, and that's also something that I mentioned already, is how can we best put these two concepts together. And I think also both presentations that we just heard raised some issues that come or that are popping up if you want to be or if you want to comply to the Basel Convention on one hand, and on the other hand want to move to a circular economy process or concept. So in order to really open the discussion and to get a first statement also from you guys and see a bit where all of you are standing, I would like to raise the question to you all. So please, a short statement of not more than 1 minute each. If you think that the Basel Convention promotes circular economy or hinders circular economy, so what is really, in your point of view, the connection between Basel Convention and the concept of circular economy, and why you think that they are working together or really hinder each other. So I would start with Jim, because you're the first on my screen here. Please.
Okay, sure. Thank you, Elizabeth. Before we had the term circular economy, the Basel Convention was born, and it really was designed to prevent the worst excesses of linear thinking, linear activity of just doing the quick and dirty thing, going to the cheapest place in the world where you could dump your waste. It's very important to note that the circular economy concept, when it was originally exposed to the world, and the very famous poster that you've all seen with all the circles and arrows in the middle of it, there were 3 pillars. One of them was to get rid of negative externalities. And that's what the Basel Convention did. It says you will not do this kind of exploitation and dumping and using third countries as places where you can externalize costs and harm without paying the costs. So it was really a pioneer in the direction of let's close off those quick and dirty dumping grounds so that we can move toward a circular economy.
Okay, thank you. I think that was very clear. Thank you, Jim. Sam, what do you think about the concept and how the two concepts actually work together?
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, and good afternoon from Accra to all over the world who are viewing us or taking part in this discussion. I think simply the Basel Convention, the objective is clear: to protect human health and environment from hazardous waste and other waste. So I also believe that the circular economy is also in for human health protection and also for the environment. We don't want waste to dispose of, but remain, in circulation more or less in the economy, so that, we can have resources to use them and also avoid harm to our health environment. So to me, they are intended. That's what I also want to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sam. Chris, do you want to go next?
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yes, thank you very much. Waste used to be seen as an environmental hazard only. And there is one big thing that has changed. If we convert towards a circular economy, waste is a raw material. And I used to manage a company producing from these waste raw materials again. And the problem is that we are delivering into industries that need to have plannable supply chains for their raw materials. One of the problems that I see is with the Basel Convention, particularly with notifications, that it takes huge amounts of time and money, but the more important part is the time. And we need to find solutions to solve that problem. Wastes are now a raw material and not anymore just an environmental hazard.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Chris. Kimberly, please, what do you think about the issue?
Thanks so much. So I think, as Jim indicated, the Basel Convention is a tool designed to solve a problem that exists. And so in that regard, it's neutral as to whether it's designed for the linear economy or a circular economy. It's a neutral tool. The question is then the implementation of it, and whether the implementation leads to the ability for economies of scale that you might need for the circular economy or not. So I think that's where and also building on what Chris said, we need to look at how countries are implementing it and the capacity that they have to implement it, and to have a conversation around that as to where we need materials for repurposing and reprocessing.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I think this also really gives us a great basis to dive into the discussion. So I think in the presentation of Daniel, we also heard about the examples, where it's maybe also difficult to, when you look at the Basel Convention from another point of view. So when you really look into the obstacles that you face when you are having waste in a developing country or in a non-OECD country where you maybe do not have the recycling facilities available that would be able to treat the waste, and that there are also still issues with moving then the waste from those countries to countries where you have certified recycling companies. So my question would now go to Jim. What do you think when you hear really the examples that Daniel presented? What do you think, how do you see the situation, and where do you think it is necessary to really start getting active in order to also really close the cycle when you want to get the waste out of the country, which is there, and because it's not only the countries are not only receiving it, but they also create the waste themselves, of course, at some point.
Yeah, what Daniel was talking about is when we want to see waste move, because they're moving to internalize costs. They're going to a higher standard. They're going towards ESM and not away from it. And I have to say, although that was given as the presentation to talk about, that is the minority of waste trade. Most waste trade takes place for brute economic reasons, follow the path of least economic resistance. It's very linear and it goes from rich to poor. But what Daniel's talking about is real, and it is a serious problem. And that is when we want to move waste from the south to the north, for example, to internalize costs and do the right thing, particularly with waste where you're not able to deal with it in the home country. And there have been too many instances of this being a problem, very sluggish implementation, if at all. And I think part of the problem is that we don't realize that in a developing country, maybe Sam can speak to this, you don't have a lot of staff. You don't have a lot of resources. You don't have people to stamp those documents and move them along. That's one issue, that's resources. And maybe we could talk about a mobilization fund to assist those type of movements. The other thing is education, like was mentioned by Daniel. The whole country needs to understand the Basel Convention, the customs agents, etc. They need to know it's important to move things out of the country. Finally, we need to streamline the process by making it digitized and more transparent. So without amending the convention, we can actually have the Secretariat perform a role of saying, okay, the notification went out, we see it on our digital readout, we are going to put out an alert after 20 days, you should be waking up to this. And you put these kind of alarm system going out and make it all very transparent. I think people are going to be embarrassed to not move documents that are sitting on their desk when the whole world can see it. You can do that right now without amending the convention. Just enforce things through transparency.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. I think that's already a great proposal forward. Chris, do you want to react on this? I saw you nodding and you have very practical experience. Do you think that would help?
Well, if I just look at the European Union where we operate, it doesn't work yet in the European Union. But then again, we need to find solutions, and Jim is absolutely right there. And one of the solutions that I see is digitalizing it, which is only one part of the equation. We should not forget either that I see an inflation also in the amount of wastes that are called and classified as hazardous. We see an enormous amount of waste that are currently called hazardous that weren't called hazardous in the past. And we also have another problem, and that is that many shipping companies do not accept any hazardous waste on their ships. We have seen in the past in the Basel Convention that very often we were looking at big shiploads full of wastes. Today we are transporting mainly in container loads. And container ships are a different beast with regards to the logistics and how these companies react. They are mainly big companies and they just do not want to have any hazardous materials on board. And then, of course, we have the issue of transits and permits for transits. And containers do not always take the same route. They change their routings very often. And suddenly something is sitting in a different port and suddenly it's an illegal transport. You know, that sort of practical things are in place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think also really this practical side of things is very important to keep in mind if you suggest also adjustments maybe to the convention, or if you imply new rules. But in general, and from a trade point of view, I would like to raise the question to Kimberly if we ever can have a truly circular economy if we ignore the realities of economic exploitation and use trade to externalize costs of waste management. So what do you think, from a trade perspective, how do you see this this issue?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So it's a clear answer. Trade should not be used to externalize the cost of waste management. What was achieved with the Basel Convention is important, to Jim's point that was made at the beginning. And I think we need to then look at the implementation of where we need to actually move and properly internalize the costs of certain waste that cannot be processed in a country to another country where they can be processed. That trade is quite small at the moment because the system is quite complex. But I think we need to work on that implementation. We need to work on capacity building. Also because there's an opportunity, if you do it right, for job creation on both sides. There's the opportunity for job creation in the collection process of the waste if it's done responsibly. And again, there's a big piece around working to formalize the informal sector and spread skills there. And then there's an opportunity for job creation as well, where the waste is going probably in developed countries at the moment. There may be opportunities for investment for these facilities further down the line in developing countries as more and more waste is produced, particularly in the case of electronics. We'll continue producing more of this, so we'll need to expand the volume of recycling facilities that exist worldwide. Currently there are quite few, but that's something that's going to take a decade or so. And so in the meantime, the question is, what do you do with the waste that you have now, bearing in mind the volumes of e-waste, for example, that were shared in by the Swiss speaker at the start of this panel.
Yes, thank you very much, Kimberly, also for this statement. Sam, from a perspective of a developing country or of a low-income country, how do you see this? How do you see the lack of resources also in in the responsible authorities in order to approve the shipments and in order to control the shipments?
Yeah, thank you so much, Elizabeth, for the question. I think we have real issues at stake because I believe that the Basel Convention is so important to us, especially the principles involved, the transboundary movement, and also the environmental sound management issues. But we have implementation challenges, even as a developing country. And one of the issues that has already been mentioned is that the importers or those who are involved in the trade, they think that the convention is bureaucratic. It is also, dragging or affecting their trade, and also the paperwork is so much. But then we as a country or developing parties, we need these things. That notwithstanding, the challenge notwithstanding, we believe that some of the issues can be solved maybe administratively. At the country level, the capacity building issues are so important. Many of the countries don't have the requisite even infrastructure in place, what we call the coordinating mechanism. For example, in Ghana, we are happy that the EPA is the focal institution for all the convention. Therefore, we have a center which manages all these chemical and waste related issues together, and therefore we have some kind of capacity, but it's woefully inadequate. And the customs and other government authorities involved also need to be brought on board and be maybe, if I were maybe use the word schooled or be educated on how to apply these things. The shipments, most of the time we find out that what are coming in the country are not in accordance with the convention, but they want to still push it. They have got this on board of ships, and the people are also looking for their money. And if you talk about it, you think that you are wasting their time, and that they are contributing towards development, and you are rather putting some bricks on their work. But I believe that the convention needs to be positioned well with the implementation aspects, so that it can benefit all of us. Yes, sort of. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. And I think you also just raised a very important point that which was also raised already by Isabel, that the discussion about waste and non-waste is also still very important. And we also have seen that there are still some loopholes in the convention that make it possible to to also export equipment or products that are labeled actually for reuse and then but are actually waste, and that they would then reach developing countries. And I think this was also in one of the comments raised by Ban on the Swiss Ghana proposal. So maybe one last question before we move on to get some inputs from the audience also. A quick response from Jim, and then Chris also raised his hand. Jim, how do you think we could actually close these loopholes of exporting non-functional goods to developing countries?
Yeah, well, we had this problem solved, we thought. There was a MPPI partnership and a PACE partnership at Basel to determine how to deal with the issue of people exporting things saying it's going to be repaired or it's for reuse, etc. And we created the divider line that we believed was going to make the most sense. And that is, if it's non-functional, it's a waste. And then you have to follow the rules. If it's a hazardous waste, you have to control it. So the problem now is that the manufacturers came in after that and played a heavy role at the Basel Convention and changed in a guideline the definition of functionality being a key component of whether something's a waste or not, and put a loophole into the guideline. Now, it's only a guideline, it's not legally binding. In many countries all over Africa, for example, they still believe that something is non-functional, it's a waste. But the problem is, as soon as you give a loophole like that, everyone will exploit it. So now you'll see, we're afraid that everyone who wants to export their e-waste will just say, don't worry, it's going to be repaired. We're going to send it for repair. And this can be some of the most hazardous material, completely non-functional, and it has a loophole now. So this is a big concern. And we think we should go back to the definition of functionality versus non-functionality. That is a clear dividing line that we can rely upon. The problem with saying everything's going to go for repairs, a lot of it will not get repaired. It'll be a bogus excuse. And then the repair itself, even if it's legitimate, can create a loss of hazardous waste. We observed in Thailand, so before the pandemic, many flat screens coming in with the mercury lamps, and they were converting the mercury flat screens to LED flat screens, which is a great idea. But the problem was they were dumping the mercury. And so that's an example of how the repair process can be very dirty. So we need to control things that have the potential to cause harm in this way. And so we really think that the Swiss-Ghana proposal would benefit from adding that closure of that loophole so that we control things that are just said to be going for repair.
Thank you, Jim. I also agree with you. But Chris, you raised your hand, please. You're muted, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you for warning. Now, I raised my hand for two reasons. One is the difference between controlling flows of waste, in other words, controlling the procedure, and the other one has to do with hazardous, non-hazardous. Now, with regards to the controlling of the waste, if I look at what has happened in the 90s with the customs organization, they have implemented this concept of authorized economic operators. Something similar could happen with waste, where you define the standards and rules for this is an environmentally properly functioning recycling operation, for which the procedure to get materials shipped there to be much easier. And that sort of logic we are trying to bring in with the concept we call in Europe the fast track notifications. But the second thing is this concept of ever increasing the amount of things that are called hazardous is a problem for the recycling industry as well. So if you have the concept of controlling waste going to authorized facilities that are checked and are working properly, why would you have to call everything hazardous? Because they have the task of making sure that the hazardous components are separated and discarded in a proper way, without calling everything hazardous. You know, raw materials that you draw out of the soil in terms of ore are not called only hazardous as well. You know, so we need to find a balance there.
Mm-hmm. Kimberly, you raised your hand, please. And I just have to mention that we are almost up with our time, so I'm just be short, and yeah, I'm sorry for that.
No problem. So I would just add to that I think the AEO idea is an interesting one to apply here. I would suggest that rather than trying to drive this across all the parties to the Basel Convention, the interested parties that maybe have the recycling facilities or have a solid circular economy plan and collection process in place, could look to partner with each other and build Article 11 agreements layered on top of Basel. So there is the space for that. In the trade world, we call this plurilateral, bilateral collaboration. And I think this would be great for countries to start exploring those options, particularly to then pilot the circular economy and see what lessons can be learned around that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Kimberly. Also, it's now already 4:20. Actually, our workshop is time is already over, but I quickly want to check with Matthias if we have, if you could get some core statements from the audience or questions.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. Actually, it was quite active, and the platform gives me like 3 to 4 levels where I receive questions, which is great, but which makes the life a little bit complicated. So there's Q&A, there's the Hover platform, there's the Zoom platform. There were lots of comments also a little bit provocative comments. I think you probably have to see them yourself. I think the important thing, I just pick out maybe 2 or 3. So one thing was, okay, until now, Basel Convention was avoided quite often already. So adding new complications or making it a little bit more complicated, and that probably points towards the Swiss Ghana proposal. Why would it be even better if things get more complicated, especially pointing towards the implementation of the Basel Convention? There was one thing. The second thing was about the hazardous substances, so that actually Basel Convention doesn't really consider so much that hazardous substances are also generated in countries of the South, for example. But I think you, in your discussion, you have addressed this quite well already, so that we also need to make sure that also in the other direction, this can be exported to a country where there is possibilities, technologies to treat that. It was mentioned like OECD, non-OECD, probably that's a little bit paternalistic. I think it's just that the matter is if there is technology or not. That's probably more the notion. And the third thing, there were a few questions around the costs, and also mentioning that actually what changes the claim quite a lot when it gets to the export of hazardous substances from, for example, from Africa to Europe to be treated in Europe, that way actually the transport costs are much higher than the other way around, so which changes the economic equation. So this was a little bit what I had picked out, so maybe somebody wanted to react on that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, one of the things I'd like to react to is this notion that the paternalism effect, it isn't so much all about facilities. The OECD, non-OECD divide is largely an economic one. And so you could theoretically say, we can have this great facility and put it in the middle of Burma or Myanmar, theoretically. The problem is that when you're a poor country, you don't have the safety nets and the infrastructure to support that facility. You don't have all the things we take for granted, like people that can go out and inspect and monitor, and landfills and hazardous waste management, and occupational safety and health clinics, and the right to redress grievances if you're someone who gets cancer at the facility. So all of that safety net is missing when you don't have resources as a rich country. So it isn't just about finding good facilities around the world. And so I think that that divide recognizes that the world is not a level playing field. And the circular economists have got to recognize that as well.
Sam, you raised your hand, and I think after your comment, we have to close the session. Sorry, but Sam, please.
Yes, thank you, Elizabeth. I don't agree with the people who say that the Ghana-Swiss amendment will complicate the issue of the convention. In the sense that for us in the developing countries, I mean, the waste and non-waste issues are things that we are battling with. So sincerely, I mean, what is coming in, whether it's hazardous waste or non-hazardous, we still have to ensure that they are going through the TBM and also the PIC procedures. To us, that's the way forward. Otherwise, if it's been hazardous and then we don't have the procedures in place, it will not help us. So we believe that all the way should move through transboundary ESM and through the PIC procedures. That way, we'll be able to check what is coming in and what, I mean, is going through maybe some other routes. Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you very much, Sam, also for this last statement. Yeah, we are really already over our time actually, and there are only 5 minutes left until the next session starts. So I'm sorry that I have to close this workshop at this very interesting point of the discussion. So yeah, I think that's as it usually is, that as at the most interesting discussions start, actually we have to close. But thank you very much everyone for joining the discussion. I hope we will be able to continue this, but I'm sure we are, because the topic is definitely, there is even more around the topic of the Basel Convention, the circular economy. We will also see how the proposal from Switzerland and Ghana will continue, what will be the final decisions around that. So thank you very much everyone for your input, for your active discussion, and also the panelists, the audience also, sorry for your reactions and your questions. I wish you a good rest of the conference, and hopefully it will not be the last time that we discuss about the topic. See you everyone, and thank you very much for joining. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.